Well, good afternoon or good evening, whenever you may be watching this, the second official edition of Hotty Toddy Talk with Austin and Nick. Hey, that's us. As we are ready to recap what was, in the end, a really good weekend for Ole Miss baseball. It started off a little rough on Friday. We could dub that the great implosion game for both teams. But Saturday and Sunday turned out to be really good. It was an all-around momentum-building weekend for the Rebels after a very good and projected Big Ten season champion by the coaches poll, Iowa Hawkeyes team was at Swayze Field. Nick, overall, you got pretty much everything you wanted to see out of Ole Miss, minus some blubs on Friday night.
Yeah, I agree. It was, after Friday night, things were kind of bleak there. It was good to see the offense get back in the game, but, it was just one that kind of got away. But, yeah. Saturday, Sunday, good games, finish off the weekend with the series win. So, yeah, you basically, like you said, saw everything you wanted to see.
Well, I would like to point out, by the way, before we go any further, that on our preview show, you and I were both talking about the pitching staffs for these two teams, and we said specifically, mind you, that it would be kind of a role reversal for both of these teams, that Iowa would want to get a lot of runs on our starters because our bullpen was better, whereas we wanted to get to Iowa's bullpen faster because their starters were so good. And, well, would you just look and see what happened over the weekend? The bullpen for Iowa was an implosion waiting to happen, whereas their starters were pretty solid overall. Whereas Ole Miss's starters were a little so-so at first. Not terrible, but not great. Whereas the bullpen was fantastic, as they have been. Exactly. It's almost like we knew about what we were talking about there, Nick.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, like you said, we talked about it pretty in depth. Yeah, we saw it Friday night, with Brody Breck, as advertised, But it was good to see, although we didn't end up winning the game, we got him out. Was it 5 complete innings? He threw around, I think he eclipsed the 100 pitch mark, and got him out of the game and was able to, like I said earlier, kind of wiggle our way back in that game. It got away, but yeah, and then I thought Saturday's starter, he was okay. And then yesterday we saw an Obermueller, kind of what we had thought, but maybe not, although we did give him his first earned run of the season, which is, although it's I think he had just 2 starts. So his third start Sunday. But yeah, just as advertised pitching. And then, like you said, I thought Gunnar Dennis early Friday night was good. And then he let that 5th inning kind of ended up, I think it was 2-1 game, ended up at the end of that inning being 5-1. And then JT Quinn, not so much, and then obviously we'll get into it more, a big day from Grayson Saunier yesterday.
Yeah, we'll get to him obviously in a few minutes. Definitely was the bright spot on the mound for the weekend for the Rebels for sure from a starting pitcher perspective. Brody Breck, yeah, you nailed it. 5 innings on Friday night. He gave up 5 hits, but that turned into only 2 runs. He struck out 11. Only one of those runs was earned, by the way. Ole Miss left so many on base on Friday against him. Had multiple opportunities against him, and you just kept seeing it. It was kind of like the deja vu from opening weekend, in particular down there in Hawaii, where they just kept leaving runner after runner after runner after runner on base. Now, Brody Breck, let's not take away from him. There's a reason, as you mentioned it several times in our preview show, that he's going to be an MLB top draft pick, probably top 20 draft pick in the draft. There's a reason for that, and we saw it. His stuff is electric. It's hard to read. It's got great speed, great movement. He throws high 90s when he gets that fastball going. He's got a 90 slider when he gets it going too. So let's give him all the credit. But if you're Ole Miss and you have those opportunities to get to a pitcher like that early, and you leave him on base, you only play with fire for so long, and we saw that as Iowa almost ran away with that game.
Yeah, and the difference in the game was we couldn't get the big hit when we needed it, and they did. In that 5th inning, as I talked about with Gunnar Dennis, it was a 2-out, bases loaded double from their catcher that put up 3 runs and kind of, I think it ended up being 5-1 at that point. But yeah, and then we couldn't do it with bases loaded, and it seemed like, eventually in this game of baseball, eventually those hits will start finding green grass, finding a spot. But Friday night, they just it just didn't happen. And that slider he has, Brecht, and they even said it on the broadcast Friday night. You could tell them it's coming in. They're still going to have a hard time hitting it. It's just one of those pitchers, like I said, you just kind of have to take your lumps because he was so good.
Yeah, and now there were obviously a couple of plays that the umpires ruled in the favor of Iowa that you could look at, particularly when it became 5-1, was immediately following what Mike Bianco and I thought was a runner going out of the base path and avoiding a tag, and the umpires even reviewed it. Or I don't think, actually, no, they determined it was not reviewable, is what happened. So they did not review it, but it was pretty, I mean, to avoid the tag that close, it's hard to imagine he wasn't out of the base path. And Mike Bianco, you could fault Mike Bianco for several things if you wanted to. But one thing you can never fault Mike Bianco for, really, is when he challenges the umpires. Typically, he has a pretty good reason, and we see him. He has a history of winning challenges. It's very rare that you see Mike come out and argue with the umpires unless he's going to win it. So for Mike to be that irate about it led me to believe that he saw something that he thought was pretty clear, that the runner was out of the base path. And then later on in the game, of course, there was the diving catch that was ruled not a diving catch after replay by Ethan Groff. And that was very clearly a catch. I don't understand why you're going to use replay if you can't get it right. So there were a couple things there. And then the big double off of Dennis, as you mentioned, and the game was kind of what you thought might be over at that point.
Yeah, like you said, there was a couple things, that kind of went Iowa's way. But yeah, on the runner out of the baseline, to me, if a base runner ever has to make like a football move to avoid a tag, he's out of the baseline in my book. And then, like you said about Mike, going out and getting pretty animated with the umpire, you have to, like, as a player, coach that's going to go up there and have your back.
Yes.
Instead of having like you said, it's not a reviewable play, but you go out there and talk to the umpire, whether, and it's just part of, a coach having his players' backs. And as a player that has to, sometimes you'll even see coaches go out there and kind of cause a stir and get ejected to, kind of rally the troops. And then, the Groff catch, it was, I thought they ruled it a catch. So I thought it was a catch. I didn't think there was enough evidence to overturn it. But it is what it is, and it's you call a spade, but we could sit here and talk about umpires all day. It's over. They're not perfect, but we would like them to be. But it is what it is,
Yeah, and there's been some really, really bad umpiring across the country in the early part of the season. There's been quite a few videos making the rounds of some calls and some players getting ejected in particular for celebrating big home runs. That has always bothered me. Let the kids play. Not going to get into that. That's not part of our show, but just the umpires insert themselves a bit too much in these games. But you said the key words. What the rule is, you got to have indisputable evidence to overturn something. The Groff catch was ruled a catch on the field. There was certainly not enough there to say it wasn't. Right. They overturned it anyway. Again, it's over. The game's over. Ole Miss made a rally in the eighth inning with a lot of walks. The bullpen was as advertised for Iowa, not very good. They literally walked Ole Miss back into that game. And then Ole Miss had a chance to take the lead, wasn't able to do it. Then things got hairy for Ole Miss in the next inning. You certainly could question the pitching moves that were made if you wanted to. We're not here to be Monday morning quarterback, but at the same time, you have to wonder why in that case we didn't see a Mason Nichols or a Josh Mallitz. I think it's certainly a valid question to wonder why neither one of them made an appearance. Mm-hmm. That said, again, you can't change it. I'm sure Coach Bianco had his reasons for putting in who he put in, but it got away in a hurry, and Ole Miss they got 5 runs in the bottom half, turned around and gave Iowa 6 runs right back, and then it was at that point it was kind of a hope and a prayer.
Right, yeah, and hindsight's always 20/20, right?
Yeah.
We come in, we win that game, with Spencer, and that's why we didn't put in one of the other two, and then we lose it, and then you turn around and win the series, and then, it ended up being okay. But yeah, I'm with you, kind of, you definitely question, but just, and like you said, with Iowa's bullpen, I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but their bullpen, 24 free passes between walks and hit by pitches. And I know for a fact yesterday had more hits than we had, more walks than hits. And I think it was very close Saturday, and it was a weird weekend to be a hitter. It wasn't, if you look at some of, just the final scores, you see 12-8 the last two games, but you say, okay, they're hitting home runs, they're hitting the ball around the ballpark, but it really wasn't that. It was, a lot of free passes and some patient at bats and, bases loaded, sac flies, you and I talked about. And I haven't looked, but we're one of the top teams in sacrifice flies, which is good to see. Some unselfish at bats, players doing their jobs. Yeah, just kind of a weird weekend offensively for Ole Miss.
Yeah, not trying to do too much of the plate. 16 sack flies is what Ole Miss sits at today. That is tied for first in the country with Samford. Samford, not Stanford. Samford. It's always hard to pronounce them when you're trying to differentiate. Samford, I believe, is over in Alabama.
Yeah, over in Alabama. Yeah.
So yeah, they are 16 sack flies. We'll get into that more. Obviously, Ole Miss producing maybe not as much as you would like, and certainly that came back to bite them on Friday. 13 walks on Friday, 14 strikeouts for Ole Miss batters. Iowa struck out 16 times. Ole Miss only walked 9 of them. You're like, oh, well, that seems like it should be a win. Yeah. Ole Miss left 17 on base on Friday night. That was the big difference in the game. And like you said, and like Mike said in his post game, couldn't get the big hit, and Iowa did. And certainly you wish you could reverse that, and Ole Miss might have been looking at a sweep. I certainly never expected a sweep against Iowa. Yeah. They're just too good of a team. You'll definitely take the series win. And we've got a lot more positive things to talk about when it comes to Saturday and Sunday. Before we do that, we'll talk about Saturday and Sunday in just a minute. Let's hear from 2 of our great sponsors. What's going on, guys? It's Austin with Hotty Toddy Talk and the Rebel Walk, here to tell you about 2 of our fantastic sponsors that are on board with us this season. You guys know the first one like the back of your hand by now, Dead Soxy and DeadSoxy.com. We love these guys, and you guys should too. If you're not wearing Dead Soxy socks by now, what are you waiting for? You can use the code Rebel Walk anytime to get 25% off site-wide. Doesn't matter if Ole Miss wins or loses on the field, you get 25% off site-wide with the code Rebel Walk. And while you're there, check out their Ole Miss exclusive NIL socks to upgrade your socks and elevate Ole Miss. Support Ole Miss athletics and specific Ole Miss athletes with their NIL exclusive socks. Check them out at deadsoxy.com. And secondly, we're thrilled to have on board with us this year Rebel Closet. If you're looking to refresh your wardrobe, get Rebel ready for less with Rebel Closet at 914 Jackson Avenue East. It's the best kept shopping secret in Oxford. Give them a call, 662-912-0393 with any questions that you may have, or check them out on Instagram at rebelcloset_OX. Rebel Closet, get Rebel ready for less. All right, well, we talked about Friday, enough about Friday, because Saturday and Sunday is where it really went much better for Ole Miss. Now, things didn't start off great on Saturday, to be perfectly honest about it. JT Quinn, JT's just had some trouble. I mean, with the fastball in particular, we don't know exactly what's going on. The control's not there. I don't think I've ever seen someone spike that many fastballs. I think it was 4 that he ended up spiking before he was finally removed. Just a rough outing for him. And you sometimes, it's hard to tell what's going on with a guy. It's hard to tell why someone has quite that much control problems with what is really his primary pitch. But he only makes it 2 2/3. Ended up giving 6 hits, 5 runs. Only one of those runs was earned. A lot of errors as well for Ole Miss on Saturday too. A little bit of defensive problems that you kind of saw behind him. He walked a couple, struck out a couple, but the bullpen really came in on Saturday and did their job. And then the Ole Miss offense really got going in the mid stages of that game.
Yeah. Like you said, JT Quinn, it's the fastball command, right? You see the breaking ball, it's good. And you mentioned the fastballs in the dirt. There's a few golden rules as a pitcher, and that's one of them. You can't throw fastballs in the dirt. You got to give your catcher a chance. Blocking a 90+ mile an hour fastball that's possibly going to bounce off the plate, not make it 60 feet is hard enough. So, it's just, and you heard Mike talk about it after a couple of the games, maybe a little bit of blister issues, which, early in the season with, some cold weather can be a problem. I don't know if that's the whole problem. I think that started in Hawaii and kind of has lingered, but it's just, and I hate to, it's not, I don't think it's time to move on, but it's definitely, before we get to conference play, you either got to figure out, what he's going to be for the team, whether it's a Saturday and you're going to pick him as an opener, give him his one inning, maybe a good first inning and see what you can get out the bullpen, which I thought, Austin Simmons has been awesome thus far. And I think, coming down the stretch of the season, I would like to see a lot more of him because he's proven early that he is worth a spot in the bullpen.
Yeah.
So, and then pitching Saturday really came on strong, and as did the offense. And then if you look at it, offensively, Groff and Fischer were the difference.
Yeah.
It was a 7-run win, and they combined for 7 RBIs.
Yeah.
You can't ask for much more out of your 1 and 2 hitters.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And you get Fischer for 2 bombs. And I don't think Groff had a hit, but he had those RBIs. So it was good to see Saturday, to get back in the win column for sure.
Yeah, Groff walked twice, and that contributed to his RBIs. Of course, Fischer with 2 big flies. Boy, has he come on strong.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, we'll really talk about tomorrow with him as well, or Sunday, I should say, with him as well, and kind of what happened there. Everything seems to be okay with him, but certainly you hate to see him take that shot to the head. But Andrew Fischer was certainly the hero of Game 2, and kind of the hero for Game 3 too. Before he left the game on the other side on defense, right. We'll get to that as well. But yeah, just a really well-rounded game. It was 1-1 after the first inning, and then Iowa got 3 in the third. That's kind of where the game got away from Quinn, as Iowa ends up scoring 3 runs in the third inning, and then it came down to Mitch Morrell. He did a great job, got that third of an inning. Then we had Austin Simmons, as you mentioned. After that, ended up getting the win, his second win. Love what I'm seeing out of Austin Simmons. Now, obviously, with him being a football player, I'm sure that Lane Kiffin and the staff are monitoring his usage. I don't know what exactly those rules are, but it would not shock me if there's something there where they say, okay, he can only throw X, Y, Z amount of pitches. Who knows? But typically, when you've got a guy who's going to be a quarterback for the football team as well, dual sport athlete who just so happens to be a pitcher and a quarterback, well, those both require use of the arm. Obviously, if you injure your arm playing baseball, well, it's still injured for football too. It's no different. Right. So I'm sure there are monitorization things there of some kind. But still, him getting 2 innings, solid innings too, and he's done that in back-to-back outings. So to see that from him is fantastic. Be a great middle of the rotation guy for sure to maybe set up your closer. Josh Mallett, of course, coming in, getting a couple of strikeouts as well. Sam Takoyan getting his first appearance. Good to see him come in and close that game out. So overall, you still don't want to put the cart before the horse because SEC play is going to be a different animal, and man, are we seeing some ridiculous teams in the SEC here.
Absolutely.
But the pitching is starting to get where you want to see it. Yeah,
absolutely, 100%. Just like we've talked about, the bullpen this weekend was, outside of Friday night and, the late 3 runs yesterday, has been nails, has been everything you wanted to do, backup or starting pitching. And like you said, the SEC is going to be a different animal. If you want to compare apples to oranges, maybe our pitching staff right now, and no disrespect to our staff, but if you look at LSU and Arkansas, those are 2 staffs right there, not even talking about their bullpens, just their 3 starting pitchers are they're elite, and they're there for a reason. And that's the reason, you see all these high profile players, go in LSU and Arkansas, and they're constantly in Omaha, and pitching wins a lot of games. So really pitching is where you would like to see it, but, just kind of want to keep it, a steady flow.
Well, the ERA after the weekend has dropped tremendously for Ole Miss, down to 4.54 as a team, which is fantastic if you're Ole Miss after what it came into. And then, of course, Gunnar Dennis has jumped up a little bit. That's because of the big 2-out double, however. Austin Simmons sitting at just 1.5, and then Liam Doyle's down to 3.6. You love to see that. Wes Mendez had a great performance until he did give up a couple of 3 late runs in his outing yesterday, but that was kind of in garbage time. It was his 3rd inning. He's not really used to going that long. So you can't really fault it was a big lead for Ole Miss that time. So nothing too major. But the big pitching story of the weekend for Ole Miss is on Game 3, and it comes from Grayson Saunier. Ole Miss needed a big outing from their Sunday guy. You tie the series up. You've got the momentum. You've got a chance to win a big series. Grayson Saunier, coming into yesterday's game, had only made it to the 5th inning twice in his career, both of those times coming last year. His season high, 6 innings last year. That's as far as he's ever made it. That, of course, is including one of the 2 times he made it 5th. But usually was not able to make it out of the 3rd or the 4th, was really struggling to get through the lineup that 3rd time when it came down to it. He puts up 5 shutout innings yesterday against Iowa with a little help from the defense, from Andrew Fischer in particular. What a play Andrew made on the double play to third base early in that game to get him out of a bases-loaded jam. That was fantastic. But overall, Grayson Saunier, just 2 hits and 2 walks over the course of 5 innings, no runs allowed. When you needed him to step up, he stepped up in a big way.
Yeah, it was a great outing, and it's nice to get those outings when you need them most. It wasn't the big, sexy, 11, 12 strikeout outing, but it was a clean, 2 hits, 2 walks, and no runs on like I said, when you needed it most. So it was good to see him, and you mentioned Andrew Fischer's double play. That got me off of my couch. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
But that was huge. There was a couple, nothing to Saunier's fault, a couple errors, loads the bases, and you got 1 out, and you're kind of, feel like we've all seen this movie before, where it can kind of get out of hand. And you had that line drive, right to Fischer, and he dives, and just an unbelievable play, and got me off my couch. You see Fischer get emotional, and you can see Luke Hill off in the distance over at his shortstop position, jump up and get excited. So I think that for me, and I'm sure for Saunier, was just a big, big relief, and then I'm pretty sure he went out in the 3rd and did 1, 2, 3 after that. Yeah. So, just a big day for him.
Yeah, and Luke Hill made it. Speaking of Luke Hill, great basically a solo double play he got with a fantastic grab the ball, go to second base, throw it over to first. So I guess technically you probably consider that a 6-3 because it wasn't him tagging both bases. But, he did most of the work on his own there. Great play as well. You were certainly concerned about the defense there a little early, wondering what the heck was going on. And then Andrew Fischer makes up for it in a big way. Andrew was, of course, plunked in the head with a fastball from Obermueller midway through that game. Looked very scary. It looked a lot scarier than it turned out to be, thank goodness. According to head coach Mike Bianco, they believe he just suffered a punctured eardrum. I say just suffered a punctured eardrum, but I guess in baseball terms, that's not a very serious injury, although it sounds incredibly painful. I would not want to experience it. And I'm sure it's no fun. But he is supposed to be seeing an ENT if he hasn't already at some point today, being Monday, is what Coach Bianco said. They don't expect him to miss much, if any, time, depending on what the ENT says. I don't know. I might be a little scared to jump back right up in the batter's box again, especially against the lefty right after taking one off the dome. But Andrew's a tough cookie. And apparently, from my understanding, was he was back in the dugout shortly following the hit by pitch and kind of cheering his teammates on from the dugout. So that's good news. So hopefully he's not in too much pain with that. I just can't imagine that's a pleasant feeling by any means to have your eardrum rung up. But thankfully, not a serious injury to Andrew.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of ironic. You said it doesn't sound like it felt too good there with the eardrum, but it's just, and you saw it with Leger early in the game. He got kind of some balls got close to him, and then we saw it all weekend kind of with the control issues from Iowa's pitchers. So, but anytime you see a player get hit in the head, and especially kind of in real time when you saw it, you weren't sure, did it hit his helmet? Did it catch him in the face? And that's never a good sign. You see a guy go to the ground and kind of, so that's not good. But hoping he's okay. And like you said, it's nothing, traumatic where, he can hopefully be back sooner than later and get him back for conference play.
Yeah, and then, of course, Eli Berch was kind of the hero as well, or not a hero, but got himself a late bomb in that game as well for Ole Miss to make it 6-0. Ole Miss ended up winning the game 8-3. It was an all-around great performance from the team as a whole over the weekend. You get past Friday night. Great job by Ole Miss of getting Friday night out of their head quickly and bouncing back in the next two. Yeah, 4 hit by pitches, by the way, yesterday from Iowa. And, you did not expect to see that from Cade Obermuller, who came into the game as probably heralded as their number 2 out of the 3 on the mound behind Brody Brecht. He had not allowed a run until yesterday, but he didn't have quite as many innings pitched as Brecht did either. Brecht, of course, getting all the publicity and for good reason, as we saw. But obviously Fischer got plunked, as well as Randall, Leger, and Berch all took one as well. And Leger, as you mentioned, got pretty frustrated about his early in the game. Threw me off a little bit to see him get quite that frustrated that early, but also with the amount of control issues, as you mentioned, that Iowa had on the mound. I think maybe he was just getting tired of it. But certainly, thankfully, nothing started from that. You didn't see an early kind of row in the infield, or that could have caused problems. But Ole Miss bounced back from that nicely as well. We'll come back in just a moment after hearing from 2 of our sponsors for Nick's Play of the Weekend and to finish off the show. Stay with us. What's going on, guys? It's Austin with Hotty Toddy Talk at the Rebel Walk, here to tell you about 2 more of our incredible sponsors that are on board with us this year. We're so thankful that they are a part of what the Rebel Walk is doing. The first is going to be Brown Insurance Agency, located at 1328 North Lamar Boulevard in Oxford. Give them a call, 662-234-2941, for all of your insurance need. Business, auto, home, life, health. Anything you need, check them out. Brown Insurance Agency, browninsurance.biz. And our second sponsor that we're so glad to have on board with us this year is Phoenix Embroidery Company. If you're looking for a one-stop shop for all of your embroidery or screen printing needs, check out Phoenix Embroidery Company, 2580 Jackson Avenue, right there in Oxford, 662-473-8085. Give John Eakes and his team at Phoenix Embroidery a call for the most professional screen printing and embroidery work you'll ever need. Phoenix Embroidery Company. Well, Nick, it was certainly a kind of a back and forth battle for you, I'm sure, trying to decide who the player of the weekend was. I know we talked about it a little bit. Without further ado, it is time for Nick's Player of the Weekend. The floor is yours, sir. Who did you eventually decide on?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Grayson Saunier. Like you said, it wasn't an easy pick, but like we talked about it earlier, just the big gutsy start on Sunday when you needed it. You lose game 1, come back, win game 2, and then you really need that rubber match start, from your starting pitcher, and we got it from Saunier. He was good. The fastball was really good, probably the best I've ever seen it, just as far as command and locating it really well. Yeah, we said, 5 complete innings, only 2 hits, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts, and no runs. Just a big start, and like you mentioned, I was back and forth between he and Andrew Fischer, but ultimately had, Fischer had another home run yesterday. Unfortunately, he left the game after getting hit in the head with that pitch. But yeah, I don't think you can argue with going with Grayson Saunier at all.
Yeah, you couldn't go wrong either way. I mean, Andrew Fischer certainly could have had the player of the weekend, and nobody would have argued with you, particularly with his couple of homers, defensive performance. But yeah, Grayson Saunier, it's you can't argue with that one either. Coming out when you needed him to put up a big game, when Ole Miss needed Grayson Saunier to be the Grayson Saunier we'd all heard about when he came to Ole Miss, he put it up when Ole Miss needed it most. Yes, did he get a little help from his defense after getting a little hurt from his defense? Absolutely. But after that, he bounced back really nicely and really held Iowa in check. And when Ole Miss needed that, you had to have your starter get through more than 4 innings on Sunday, and that's exactly what Grayson did. So I think that's a great pick. I think Andrew certainly needs his just desserts as well, and he's certainly getting them. Grayson, certainly not a bad pick, and I don't think anybody's going to argue with you for that one. And I know Mama Saunier is not going to argue with you on that one. Great to see her. She was super excited about Grayson's outing, and for good reason, on Sunday. So good to see Grayson really do that. Hopefully he'll carry that momentum as Ole Miss gets very, very close to conference play starting. And on that note, we'll finish off right quick with Around the SEC. Well, we are getting close, Nick, to conference play. Just one more weekend stands between Ole Miss and Southeastern Conference play starting, and they will start with a bang with a very good South Carolina team coming into Oxford here in a couple of weeks. Speaking of South Carolina, after the weekend, they are 8-3 overall, so they took a couple of losses over the weekend. I love how the SEC website, by the way, decided to change completely overnight. They've completely changed the format of it, and I went into it thinking, okay, this is going to be where I can – nope, it's a completely different look and layout.
Yeah.
I'm looking a little harder. But South Carolina is 8-3. Over on the East, it's Tennessee leading the East at 11-1. No surprise there. Speaking of great pitching staffs, Tennessee seems to grow them on trees. I don't know where they get them from, but they get 100-mile-an-hour flamethrowers every year. It's a little annoying, Tony. Quit getting all the flamethrowers up there in Knoxville for crying out loud. But Tennessee has another great staff. They're looking good. Georgia is 10-1. They had a great weekend against Georgia Tech. Kentucky also having a great year, 10-1. Vanderbilt bounced back nicely. They were down 11-3 to Texas in the tournament down there and came all the way back, stormed back to win that game. Texas with their second blown game of that weekend as well. They blew another one to Texas State the day before. Hey, welcome to the SEC there, Longhorns. You blew a game there to Vanderbilt. So Vanderbilt ends the weekend at 10-3. Florida and South Carolina 8-3. So the only team struggling over on the eastern side is Missouri. They are 5-6, although they did put up 28 runs in one of their games over the weekend. So they do have a prolific offense at times. And then, of course, the West, of course, we talked about them. Texas A&M, 11-0, one of the best staffs in the country, one of the best complete teams in the country. They are not going to be fun to face at all. And particularly, Laviolette is going to be a guy that you just, he's going to be incredible, just like Jack Caglianon from Florida is over on the eastern side. Just two great players there. Alabama took their first loss of the weekend, but they're still 11-1, as well as LSU, Arkansas with that great staff, and Auburn both 9-2. And Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Mississippi State's 8-4, Ole Miss 8-5. Both of them had pretty good weekends. Mississippi State with a sweep of Mount St. Mary's. Ole Miss with 2-1 win over Iowa. So they are on the up, as you would like to say, if you're Ole Miss. Coming up next for the Rebels Tuesday night, the Memphis Tigers will be in town in Oxford, the first of two midweek games against the Tigers this year. That's a regular series now. I say series, a regular two-game kind of alternating location every year. We have to play the Tigers. The Tigers not doing too bad so far this year. They're hitting 256 as a team. They're led by Logan Kohler, of course. You also got to watch out for a couple of those other names on there as well. So, but Logan Kohler, their main guy at 330. Kind of leads the way with them. Pitching staff has an ERA of 5.35. Dalton Kendrick leading the way there with a 3.38 out of their starters. Out of the bullpen, they're led by Jake Curtis with a 2.6. So Memphis trying to bounce back with new head coach Matt Riser. They are 7-6 on the year. And over the weekend, the Tigers had a series with Wright State in which they won 2 out of 3, 6-3, 13-12, and lost one 17-7. So a very roller coaster ride on Memphis team, kind of like we're used to seeing. Certainly not one to overlook, though, coming into Oxford on Tuesday night.
Yeah, they normally always play us pretty well. You know, like you mentioned, the home and away. Normally every year they'll come to Oxford. We'll go there. Yeah, and just like you mentioned about, Ole Miss being on the up, it's going to be although we're not playing 4 this week, or we are playing 4, not 5. Sorry, last week we played 5. But yeah, just you want to keep trending up. As we get to conference play with South Carolina coming up. And yeah, like you mentioned, just that Memphis is going to be a team that's going to play you well. And all these teams that come in midweek are going to normally give you their best because they want to, get that good quality win to add to, a potential postseason resume. So excited for another week of Ole Miss baseball for sure.
Absolutely. That game will be at 6:30 on Tuesday night, so a good starting time for the midweek matchup on the SEC Network Plus. Shout out Jake Ramada and Keith Kessinger, by the way. Great broadcasting over the weekend on the stream. Really, really like those two in combo for Ole Miss. So they did a great job. Keith, obviously, we know Keith Kessinger, obviously a former player and very, very knowledgeable about Ole Miss. And then Jake Ramada does a great job as well in the play-by-play booth. So really, really enjoyed that stream over the weekend with those two in the booth. It's definitely one of the better teams I think ESPN Plus has together for sure to do for Ole Miss games. 6:30 p.m. Tuesday night, SEC Network Plus, Ole Miss and Memphis will go at it. And we'll be back with you again on Thursday previewing Morehead State. That is Ole Miss's final non-conference weekend series before conference play starts. We'll have all the details for you coming up on Thursday, so stay tuned for that. He is Nick Filipich at Nick Filipich 11 on Twitter. I am at Austin on Air 1021. And, of course, at The Rebel Walk. Follow us for all of your updates, news, and all of your Ole Miss sports. Shout out Coach Yo, by the way, getting this into the SEC tournament as the 3 seed. They are playing their best basketball at the right time. So they are going to be a dangerous team come March Madness on the women's side. The men's team still a little work to do, but they play a conference tournament for a reason. Got to win these next couple of regular season games, and then you never know what might happen after that. We've seen stranger happens in men's basketball. That's for sure. So stay tuned for the Rebel Walk for all of those updates. We'll talk to you Thursday. Hotty Toddy, and have a great week.